Imagine if it was Nik the Quant Lentz.
The Carney Quant.
That's what I call my. That's actually what I call my main quant program.
There you go.
Carney Quant.
Awesome.
I love it. So, Straz, I'm a little intimidated about our guest today. I'm worried that if I ask the wrong question, I might get my face kicked in.
That's funny. I see what you did there. So, as a chart person, I'm always looking for trends and looking for themes. We've had, 10 interviews so far since we started? One of the big themes that stands out with, I think, probably 7 or 8 of the 10 is sports, right? Being an athlete before being a trader. So that's why we thought Nik was so interesting. Like, we've talked to a couple athletes, maybe even some college athletes. This is a fucking UFC fighter, right? So we're going to dive into that theme today, and I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, you know what? Let's just bring him up right now. Ladies and gentlemen, we have on the podcast today, Nik the Carney Lentz. Nik, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. How about you guys?
See, Nik's in the back rolling his eyes at us, but you have to understand, Nik, you're not the normal market participant that we're dealing with or chatting with about markets. We typically hang out with nerds. So this is different for us, you know?
Well, I mean, I sort of lucked into athletics, so I've always been a nerd, you know. I always played video games. I was the kid at lunch playing Dungeons and Dragons. I made my own RPG on a T86 calculator. So like I've been a dork my whole life. It just turned out that I could fight, you know. I guess that's the benefit of growing up in a bad situation. You know, you can be a dork and you can learn how to fight. So
oh man. All right, so let's set the stage for people who are unfamiliar with you and your background. You're a trader now, but before you got into trading, the main part of your career for the last 20 years is you were a UFC fighter, right?
Yeah,
you started in early 2000.
Yeah. I've done interviews about my life as a young person and the struggles and how I got into fighting. But just the very quick story is I got into wrestling after I moved in with my father. Bad situation. I was taken away from my home with my mother. They shipped me off to live with my father, and he inherited kind of a broken kid. And so he got me into athletics, and he was like, well, if you start wrestling, you know, I was in bad shape. I was emotionally damaged. I wasn't a very healthy kid. I was behind in school. And so he started me in wrestling, and I went into the wrestling room and just got my ass absolutely destroyed. You know, like it was a total nightmare. You know, I went home and I was like, Dad, I don't think I'm cut out for this stuff. And he sent me back. And then eventually that turned into me being one of the best wrestlers in Minnesota history. And then eventually I went to the University of Minnesota. I started wrestling there. I was a good wrestler, didn't get along with the wrestling team. I had a couple fights there, had some issues with college. When I was in college, I don't know how it's possible, but I either got an A+ or I got an F in the class. Either the teacher thought I was like a savant or they thought I was retarded. So that, you know, like it was very difficult for me to like understand what was going on. You know, a lot of times I'm not a cocky person, but I felt smarter than the teachers there. And I just felt like I understood stuff on a different level. And some teachers appreciated that. Some of them hated it. And so I eventually dropped out of college and didn't really know what I was going to do. And I always say, I can't say why, but I was broke and someone offered me to fight in some bar. And I said, hey, hell, let's try it out. And I walked out there and I knocked the guy out in like 6 seconds. And then so I was like, and they gave me $500 to do it. So I was like, well, that worked out.
Wait a second. Random dude at a bar said, I'll give you $500 to go fight this other random dude outside.
Well, it wasn't like that night, but I was at a bar and the guy did like an MMA promotion. He's like, oh, you used to wrestle. Do you want to fight? And I was like, I don't know how much money you give me. And he's like, I'll give you $500. And I was like, all right, sure. You know, it was a lot of money to me then.
Was this like a backyard wrestling type of situation or some of that like boxing that I see on Instagram where they're like fighting in the street?
No, this was, it's slightly classier than that. It was an actual bar with a roof on it, but that's about it.
Wow. And then, so then you had, that was like your moment where you were like, I should pick
No,
wrestling.
no. I didn't think about wrestling, or I didn't think about becoming a fighter then. I did that 5 more times, and then 5 more knockouts, and then I said, "Oh, maybe this is a way that I could take care of myself." And then from that point, I dedicated my life to the art of fighting.
So
And how long
these
have
guys, hold on, Straz, real quick. This guy or these people that were paying you money for these bar fights, were
Mhm.
these people like recruiters for UFC?
No,
Or
no, this is just some guy throwing a fight in a bar to get people to come to the bar. You
okay.
know, like his bar is like, I need people to come to this bar. I have no reason it's not coming. If I throw a cage in here and do some fights, it was different back then. There were no commissions, there were no rules. I mean, if you put a cage up in your bar and the cops didn't get called, it's all good. Give
they,
people a little
Wow.
money and
they
people
do,
could come
they
and
do that.
watch.
They do that where I live, but with chickens, not humans.
Yeah, well, I
Things are
guess we're a
different
little
in
more
Minnesota.
evolved.
So hold on. When you went to live with your father, Nick, that was high school?
Yeah, right before high school started.
Got into wrestling, went to
Hmm.
college for it,
Yep.
then dropped out. And then how much time was in between stopping wrestling in college and then when you started wrestling in the bars?
Ooh, I would say probably very quickly. I would say
Okay.
probably around 6 months to a year.
Then you started training.
Yeah, then I found that then I started trading by myself with my father. Then we kind of found a small gym that with a guy that trained in a garage. And then eventually I kind of started to wreck the local scene, won all the fights, got the local belts and stuff. And then I transferred up to a very high level team in the Minnesota Martial Arts Academy. And then eventually I sort of ran through that Minnesota scene. And then eventually I got into the UFC. And then a lot of the guys I trained with in Minnesota actually ended up retiring. And so then I moved to South Florida, where I live now, to train with a different team.
Oh, where in South Florida are you?
I live like 15 minutes north of Miami.
That's awesome, dude. We'll have to get a drink. I'm 3 hours below you.
Okay. Yeah. No, I live in Cooper City.
Oh, that's awesome.
Isn't 3 hours below Miami? Isn't that Cuba?
It's pretty close, right?
There's a lot of traffic on the overseas highway. Was it hard transitioning from like college wrestling to MMA?
No, no, it's not hard. I worked. Wrestling was the first time in my life that I got any recognition and that anybody really cared about me. Like I said, if you want to see, I have a pinned tweet in my bio of if you want to really get the whole view of my childhood and how it went and stuff. But it was very difficult, abusive situation, lots of drugs involved, and the first years of my life I was pretty much on my own. And so when I moved with my father, suddenly like people cared about me all of a sudden. And so like the wrestling is kind of what gave that to me. And I became very obsessive about training for wrestling. Like I just became crazy to the point where it was very detrimental. Like I trained too much. I worked too hard. But when I was able to get into fighting, I was able to sort of take that passion and sort of add a professional level over the top of it. And then that made it be able to be like a career.
Is that
When
just the
you-
kind of person you are? Like you set your mind on that, set some goals in the world of wrestling or UFC, and you were just going to go and get it? Because that brings me back to the comment that you made about how you either get an A plus or an F. That doesn't make much sense. If you're if you're capable of getting an A plus, you can get an A plus in most things. So is it like a passion situation where if you set your mind to something, you have?
I think it's a couple things. One, I think I'm very highly intelligent in like a certain aspect, like so if you go to spatial reasoning, if you go to puzzles, if you go to like you show me like a picture of what comes next or whatever, I score off the charts. But in another way, like I'm dyslexic, I have a hard time reading fast, I have a hard time in that kind of thing. So I have this personality with if I can find something that I understand, I can be very good at it. And then I have the excessive ADD type craziness to just keep going for that singular thing. I can hyper focus. It's really good. A lot of these things are detrimental in people's lives, but because I've been able to work them into things that were beneficial to me, that obsessive compulsive drive and very hyper focused nature allowed me to succeed in business. And then so really all I care about is the things that I'm doing in business and my family. And so if I only have those two priorities, it's pretty easy for me to keep busy in those kind of realms like that.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it when you were young, when you found wrestling, all of a sudden you're noticing people were caring about you and wanted to see you succeed and you were feeling like you were somebody. Whereas before maybe you weren't feeling that way. And it's natural instinct that all of a sudden, if you're getting recognized for something, even if it's something you're not even trying all that hard at, but if you're all of a sudden people are like, hey, you're pretty good at this, like that's gonna fill you up and fill you up with pride and confidence, and then you're gonna want to do more of that. This conversation hits home for me. I have a 10-year-old son at home, and he's in that part of his life where he's not sure what he wants to do or what he likes, and we're not sure what he likes. He likes a lot of little things, but nothing really lights his fire. But when we notice a hint that, oh, this is something he gets excited about, like we want to push him more and more in that direction, because I mean, you're a perfect example. As soon as you find that one thing or those two things that you love, boom, you're all in, and that's exciting, right?
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
I really
mean,
like.
Go
Sorry,
ahead.
go ahead, Nick.
Go ahead,
your
Strez.
interview.
No, I just like how you kind of pointed out that some of these behavioral traits can be detrimental, but if you figure them out and know how to make them work for you, they could actually be great, right? So do you consider yourself, like you kind of alluded to the fact that you'll get obsessed with things or hyper focused?
Yep.
Do you have that perfectionist gene, and how has that worked for you?
I do to it's hard to say I have like a total perfectionist gene, because being a perfectionist and trading don't mix, right? You're wrong way too often to be a perfectionist in trading. But when it comes to, if I'm designing a program, if I'm designing a trend following system or some kind of quantitative measure, I'm going to work on it insane amount. So when I work on something, it's not like I like do it a couple hours a day. If I want to finish something, I'll do it for 48 hours straight and, maybe take a nap. I have a cot right back here so I can take a quick nap, like if I need to. But I'm going to be obsessive about it. I'm going to get it done. And I don't know. It's difficult for me to understand, because I enjoyed that process. I enjoy that work. And it's something that I really enjoy doing. And when I don't do it, I feel like I can get compulsive about other things that can be detrimental, right? So it's like if I'm not working, then maybe I start partying or something, and I'll be the best at that too. And so I have to make sure that I stay away from those type of behaviors. I have to keep the drive. I have to keep myself focused, because I know if I wander off in a direction, I'm going to like really go for it. And so yeah, I mean, so I kind of got off on a tangent there, but that's kind of am I a perfectionist? Probably. Yeah, I would imagine that I am, but I try to keep it reasonable.
You inspired a tangent there. Speaking of tangents, you inspired a quick tangent for me real quick. I've read a lot. Look, as a lot of people, when we were young, a lot of us were really into like WWF and WWE. And so I'm fascinated when I read these stories today about the way things were 20, 30, 40 years ago in professional wrestling. And the stories you would hear about a lot of these guys is that these guys were partiers, like outside of the ring and outside of entertainment. Like they were hanging out, they were partying together. I'm curious, because you mentioned, if you weren't, you might focus and become the best partier in the world. The UFC culture amongst guys in that business, are those guys partiers? I get the sense that they're not, because I feel like they're more concerned about their physical fitness and being all healthy. But maybe you could tell me otherwise.
No, they are 1,000,000,000% partiers. Yeah, all athletes are sort of. It's sort of like it. You're sort of. I don't like to say this term because it's not really relevant, but you sort of have this like alpha male do things well. You know what I mean? Like I'm tough. I go out and that the athlete's life is a hard life. You have to watch your diet. You have to train every morning. You're always restricting yourself. So when you get that chance to not be restrictive, you're going to go out and it's going to go to an insane level, you know? And so I think you got it the exact opposite. I think most fighters that have succeeded on any level are pretty either very, very hardcore partiers or which I've been both. When my free time, I used to be a wild partier, and then I could just rein it back in. But then, I became more of a religious person. So those are the two options. I think you can be either highly religious and kind of focus your effort on that, or you can be sort of like a degenerate partier and kind of that's how you get with your free time. If you look at all the best athletes, Tiger Woods, what was he doing? Absolute degenerate. John Jones, one of the best fighters ever, absolute degenerate, right? And so you need that release. You have to have that release in life. And so you have to find a way to get that. And the only ways that I've seen in athletics and pretty much all of life are those two paths. You either have to be the degenerate path or you have to find some kind of higher meaning in life.
Don't you have to just find something that stimulates you? I'm glad that you mentioned the alpha male and not me. It sounds like classic, type A personality behavior where you're motivated by challenges, you're goal oriented, you're into taking risks, and you always need to be stimulated. So like you said, when you're hyper focused on a product or a project that's constructive and good, that's great. But in the moments you're not, you kind of need that stimulation.
I mean, I can't speak highly on this because if you're talking about types of personalities, I'm not very fluent in that. So I don't really know what that means. I've never really dissected it. But when it comes to the personality types, I'm a professional coach now and I trade. But if I see a kid that is on the verge of being a very good fighter, and I have two of them, and one is more reckless, and one is like sort of like a chill guy at home, I'm taking the reckless one because I don't know. I feel like just through experience that those guys are better fighters. Those guys are better. They just want life more. They strive for life. And sometimes you take the wrong route, but I'd rather a guy that I can mold into a better person than have someone that's just sort of like, ugh. Like if you're okay with being bored, I don't want to work with you. You know what I mean? If you're just okay, just sitting on the couch, I don't want to work with you. And that it's not that I don't like those people. Half of my life, I've always had very high stress jobs, right? Like sometimes I dream about being like a guy that installs cable boxes. That'd be great. You just go install the cable box, you go home, you don't have to think about anything. Once you're done with work, you're done. I've always picked high stress, high reward jobs for myself, but I don't think that either of them is wrong. But for my personality type and the sort of the people that I've trained in fighting, I have found that more reckless attitude produces better results.
Nick, when you made that transition from traditional wrestling into mixed martial arts, were you ever afraid of it? Was there something about it that scared you or worried you at all?
No. Wrestling is one of the most brutal and difficult sports in the world. So fighting is actually much easier because you actually get to punch people. And wrestling, it's like they take all the fun stuff away and they just leave all the miserable crap. And so you have to work really hard. You have to train so much. You're going against just insane athletes every day of your life. It's so hard. And so transitioning to fighting, the athleticism is the same, the work ethic is the same, how many hours you have to train is the same, but you get the benefit of punching people. So, it's a much better system if you ask me.
See, I would have thought that as a wrestler, when you stepped into the ring for the first time for an MMA fight, I would have thought that like you'd be terrified of getting kicked in the face because that's not something you're used to.
I had the benefit of fighting my stepfather my whole life, so I fought my whole life. So I was certainly not scared. I fought from when I was 5 years old to 13 years old every day of my life. So fighting is something that I do not fear. Pain's something I do not fear. And in general, when you're actually in a fight, it doesn't even hurt. I mean, it hurts afterwards. Like if you get hit really hard, and you get a cut, it hurts. But like essentially, it's not until after the fight, the couple weeks after, you don't really feel anything. You're in the fight. You're kind of your testosterone, your adrenaline, everything is through the roof. So you don't really the idea of being scared, it's not really an option, right? Because in that moment, there's a guy trying to kill you. So there's really no thought process to be scared, right? You wouldn't like it that you have to survive. So, when there's a guy in front of you trying to kill you, like being scared is not an option.
Do you think things like, the discipline that you learned or honed as a fighter, or um, like you said, focusing on survival or something like that? Do you think there were traits that you learned in fighting and MMA that transferred over and helped you become a trader today?
Yeah, I mean it's essentially the same type of people. You know what I mean? Like it's the same. It's just a person that split off in a different direction, but sort of that same personality type. Like the people who were in the pits back in the day. I have many of them that are mentors of mine. Like we have the same sense of humor. We have the same mindset of thing. It's just instead of going to athletics, they went the academic route, but they found sort of, like you said, I hate to use that term alpha male because I don't think it's like a real thing, but they took the nerd alpha route, right? And it's the same personality type, it's the same type of person that lifts you up. And so really, I believe that athleticism is a results game, right? Like if you don't win the fights, you're not a person, right? They kick you out. If you don't succeed, they kick you out. So you have to win. And so the trading is the same essentially, unless you're selling a service or something. But if you're trading money, someone's money, and you don't do well, then you better go get a different job, right? Like it's a pure, I can't think of the name, but it's like there's competition in it, and so it is essentially the same, right? But I think all high level endeavors are the same. To be the top of any field, whatever it is, you have to work hard. I mean, because there's people that want your job. So.
Yeah.
So when did markets start to appeal to you? Like, did this happen as you were fighting in the UFC? Did it happen back in college? Let's talk about that journey.
So originally, when I went to school to be a doctor. So that was what I was going to be. I was going to try to be a doctor. And it turned out that I really didn't find that interesting. Like the whole medical school route, I didn't find all that interesting. But I never thought about, studying finance or anything like that. And then I didn't invest. I didn't do anything because I come from a family with very little money. So the idea of having stocks or even investments, it wasn't a thing. Like that's just not something we had. We don't have retirements. We don't have that type of thing in our life. Like it's just not a thing I ever was initiated to as a child. So as I got into fighting, I got into the UFC in '09. So that's like, we had the '08 crash. And so then I'm like, oh my God, like I saw so many people lose so much money. I'm like, well, I don't want any part of that. So then I started like investing in gold and silver and crap like that, So I was like, but in general, I just bought a house and most of the money I went into just went into my house and stuff. So then eventually I started to see like I have some money. What am I going to do with it? And so I started to study markets, and then I don't know what, it just became an absolute fascination of mine. I loved every part of it. And as I started to learn more of it, I love the depth of it. I love the game of it. I love looking at charts and screens. It's like the biggest casino video game thing you can have in life, right? And it's just, if you can control yourself and you can look at it, it's just an endless possibilities of things you can do. So I used to play video games. I used to play poker. I used to do a lot of things, but the stock market sort of put everything into like a little bow, and I took that option.
Nik, you mentioned the need for self-control. Do you consider yourself to be a very disciplined person? And I'm not just talking about trading, I'm just in life. Do you consider yourself to be very disciplined?
Yes, I am. I am extremely disciplined. Like when I was fighting, I would literally weigh like pinto beans, and I would take a single pinto bean out, if it weighed too much. So like I was a very dedicated fighter. I was very dedicated to my diet. I have a very rigid schedule. I work really hard. I work really hard, and as far as discipline goes, I've always had insane levels of discipline. The thing I struggle with is the main weakness I have is overworking. So it's very hard for me to not to take a break. It's very hard for me to not run the extra mile. You know what I mean? It's very difficult for me. And so you can get injured, you can get burned out like that. And a perfect example is wrestling. I trained so hard in wrestling for those 5 years that even the thought of wrestling makes me sick now. You know what I mean? Like I can't stand wrestlers. I can't stand wrestling. I've never watched a wrestling match since. It drives me nuts, you know? Like I like fighting, but in even fighting, I don't watch fighting. I don't turn on the UFC when I'm at home. I just like the art of fighting. So there's as disciplined, I got 100, but then sort of, 100 out of 100. But when it comes to the
Balance.
discipline, when it comes to the discipline of limitation, of limiting yourself, of not overworking, I'm very low on the scale. So those two things, it's kind of contradictory, but the discipline as far as schedule, working hard, I'm up here. As the ability to take a break, to relax, I'm very low.
And how long did it take you to find that out about yourself? And maybe unplugging was a bit of a weakness.
Well, I started to have a lot harder time cutting weight, so losing weight because my body was just so tired. I started to get injured. I started to get sick a lot. So I would overtrain and I would get lots of colds. I would get the flu more often than I should. I had to get surgery on my knee and my shoulder. And then, I have like a bump in my ribs. Like I broke my rib and I didn't even notice. Like I just like kept fighting. And so now like my rib is deformed slightly. And then I went to the doctor and I was like, hey, what do you do about that? So like, you broke your rib and you didn't fix it. There's no fix now. So I don't know. I guess that's what I would say.
Nick, when you were at the height of your career in the UFC, did you have at that time, did you have a girlfriend or a wife? Was there a significant other back home during that?
I'm married now, right? I met my wife at my first fight at that bar. Yeah. She brought me ice because the guy hit me one time and I knocked him out. And then this cute girl walked up to me and offered me some ice she got from the bar, and I was like, I tried to act all tough, like I don't need no ice, and she gave me the ice, and that's how I met her.
That's so cool. So to be clear, this was the first bar fight, not the first UFC fight. She's been there since the beginning.
The very beginning, yeah, my very first fight.
Wow, she's awesome. Seen the entire arc. That's amazing.
Yeah,
we should interview her, Sean.
Did you, when you were at the height of your career, when it was, when it became your career and you were getting paid to do it? And I look, I know you had a good record, a winning record. You won a lot of fights, but you didn't win every fight. No, there were times where I'm sure you came home and you were beat to hell. And what did your wife have to say about that? Like, was she scared? Was she ever worried, or did she like fully support you no matter what?
No. She's always fully supported me. Always. When I first started fighting, you don't make any money. So she didn't make a ton of money either, but I mean, I certainly wasn't paying for us to go out to McDonald's or whatever, right? I didn't have any fucking money. So she took care of me for the beginning. And then, so as I started to make money, I've always taken care of her. Right. And I did very well in fighting. I got up to, I was 1-2 fights away from fighting for the title. It just slipped away from me. So, I've always done well. Some of the worst I got beat up were fights I won. So I came home a total mess and won. So it's like, I had lots of injuries. I've had lots of scars and stuff, but no, she never looked down on me or got too hot on me when I won or lost.
How about now when you lose money?
Well, she doesn't see the accounts, right? But I mean, when she needed a car, I bought it for her, so she's not too worried about it.
Those cars are Yeah.
But no, in general, my if I lose money, right, she has to deal with me being an asshole probably because I'm in a bad mood. But that's about it, right?
Yep.
And I mean, I can never lose too much money because I have so many built-in precautionary things. I mean, I only keep a certain amount of money in every account. So like if my account gets to anywhere it blows up a little, that money comes out of it and I'll just you can transfer money instantly now. So I can take it out right away. So it's like I'm not blowing up, I'm not doing anything. I'm never taking risks I shouldn't. And even if I did, hey, like multiple times in my life, as far as American standards go, I've been at the bottom, the very, very bottom of being broke and poor. And I can tell you it's not that much different, right? So some days, like when you have money, where do you go? You're like, oh, I want to go to the restaurant. So I'm going to go to Capitol Grill, or I just took my wife to some 2 Michelin star restaurant. Like it was good. I had a great time. It was expensive as hell, but it's the same. They're both food, right? Like I lived in a shitty little apartment, or now I live in a house. It's like they're both the same. I was fine. Like I wasn't getting rained on. So it's the same thing. There's no real risk of it. So if I were to lose all my money, uh my wife has a pretty good job. She's a pretty big project manager in an elevator company, and so maybe she'll take care of me, huh?
Well, this topic of losing actually is an interesting topic. I want to go down the road here with you because in fighting, there's losing. In trading, there's losing. When you are on the losing end of whether it was a fight or a bad trade, do you carry that around with you? Like, does that weigh on your shoulders? Do you get bummed out? Does it affect your mood? Does it affect your diet? Like, I don't know. Tell me about what
it affects me great. It affects me very greatly. And it's in trading, it was one of those things for a long time that frustrated me because I would hear people say like, "Oh, you got to be able to take a loss, or you got to be able to not let it bother you," and it always bothered me tremendously. And I've always been able to push the button or put the stop loss. I've always been able to take the loss, but it frustrated me greatly. I wanted to break everything in my room. It made me upset. You know what I mean? Like it's like, oh, I make a ton of money and then I lose it. It's like that's a terrible feeling. But in fighting and stuff, you just got to learn to deal with the person that you are. You can't just make up the idea like, oh, this doesn't hurt. Or oh, I'm not frustrated. You just have to come up with a coping mechanism to deal with it. And so if I lose a bunch of money, I'm very upset. So I'm going to go work out. I still spar at the gym. I don't need to fight people. I don't need to get hit in the head. But sometimes I need to beat somebody up because I'm frustrated. I can't beat up my computer screens. They're expensive, right? So like I still have that release. I still fight. I still train. I still work out religiously. So I can't stand losing. It really bothers me. And I do everything I can to avoid it. But, I win 55% of my trades. So I lose all the freaking time. So, it's just a part of life. And so it gets easier sometimes, but no, it pisses me off.
How actively were you trading while you were still active in the UFC? Was this just more of a side hobby at that time, or I'm wondering how
at the beginning, I was just learning about it, so it was more of a side hobby. But it became I woke up, traded the morning, went to training, came back, traded the afternoon, went to training, came back, did all my prep work, went to sleep. Pretty much 24 hours a day.
So you were getting hyper focused on training, and then in your downtime, because if you train too hard, you would get injured or get the flu, like you said. Then you would hit the books and learn about, quantitative analysis or TA.
Yep.
All right. That was the learning period. And then did you kind of have the mindset then, as a fighter, that fighting wasn't going to last forever? You eventually needed another plan for the future. And then maybe you would take what you made from fighting and then put it towards something new. Like, was that always the plan? And you were learning kind of while you were fighting because that's where you wanted.
The second I started learning about markets, that became the plan. Yeah, it was like I want to be a trader. I want to at some point start my own investment firm or a hedge fund. I had no idea what I was going to do, but that was the path, right? That was the path. And so 100%, everything I did was to save money and to do for that, save money for the kids, and then, you know, learn how to, as I'm saving money. I didn't have kids then, but learn how to put these accounts separate, learn how to trade them, learn about the difference between investing and trading. Once I started being able to code a little bit, it's like, I always thought like quantitative finance was kind of like a myth, like these people were over exaggerating how important it was. And then I started to learn about it, and I was like, oh, this is amazing. I need to know this. And so then I have to learn how to code. I have to learn how to do all kinds of stuff. So it was there's so many paths you could take, and I took it, but the end goal was always to start some type of either firm or self business to where I could manage money in some way.
Do you think that your attraction to trading was it because in your mind it seemed very much like fighting, and the fact that it's you versus the market, it's you versus the other fighter, and you felt like you had a little bit of control? Or were you attracted to trading because to you it seemed like a completely different thing that excited you?
I can't. I mean, yeah, what? Why am I attracted to women? I have no idea. I just tried it and I loved it. You know what I mean? Like I can't tell you exactly what about it. I always liked playing video games. I always liked competition. I always liked to do things that really stretched my mind. And it just seems like when I got into trading, it just filled all those needs just instantaneously. And so, I took the route, and it's like there's two routes you can take into that, right? You can become a reckless, compulsive gambler, or you can learn how to do it. And thankfully, I have the dedication and the discipline that I tried to learn how to do it instead of, just taking the reckless, as you can see with like the Wall Street bet type people now.
I'm glad that we're having this talk with you, because before I spoke to you, you're the first MMA fighter I've ever spoken to in my life. I would have assumed, and this is maybe a terrible assumption to make, but I would have assumed that if you came from that world and then now you're into the trading world, I would have thought that, you traded or you fought for 20 years. You're not afraid of anything. So you're going to get into the markets and you're going to trade with no fear. You're going to be reckless. You're going to take wild swings that may work sometimes and may crush you other times. But what I'm hearing from you is that you're very diligent about stop losses and not taking large losses. You have a plan and you're focused. I would have taken the other side on that if I had to bet what kind of trader you were. So that's interesting to hear.
Well, I think the personality type helps, and then also I worked very hard for my money, right? I don't want to throw it away. I literally sacrificed my health for it. So I have no interest in just giving it to somebody. Have I taken insanely reckless trades and been on both sides? Yeah. Yeah, I've made huge money on trades and gave it all back, on a different one. But at the beginning, as I was learning, like I had the benefit of two things. One, I'm a professional fighter. So I reached out to a lot of famous people. And because I am a professional fighter, it's sort of, I had an in with them it's like they're willing to look at the message. They're like, oh, this is cute. Look at this professional fighter guy is sending me a message. Like, sure, I'll respond to him.
When you know, and then people like who? Like Warren Buffett, like hedge fund managers, just analysts.
No, hedge fund guys, quantitative research people on Twitter, just anyone that would talk to me. I reached out and I said, hey, my name's Nik Lentz. I really want to be in finance. I would really like to know about this. I don't have any background in it. I'm willing to do anything for you. I will fly out and mow your lawn if you want me to. I will do anything if you will teach me about. And they were a specialist in something. Like I reached out to a guy who was a Eurodollar trader because I wanted to learn how to get into SOFR. I wanted to learn how to do that. And so that's what I did. I reached out to him. I said, hey, I'm not a bond trader. I don't know about STIR. I don't know about SOFR. Could you help me with this? And then, they're always so nice to me, but one, I have that in as a fighter. So they know that I've succeeded at a high level, and it's kind of cool. They can ask me about fighting. We can talk about stuff. But then they start to message me, and then they're like, well, here, kid, do this. And I come back in 2 days and I've done it. And they're like, oh, okay. They're like, well, read this book. I come back in 2 weeks. I've done it. They're
Yeah.
like, you read that book? And I'm like, yeah, I read the book. I got it. And then they quiz you and they're like, holy shit, you know this stuff better than me. And so, so, they're like, then they start to teach me and then they start to take me seriously. So, but if I wasn't a fighter, that initial message would have probably never been received. You know what I mean? They would have probably just deleted it.
But kudos.
So I had the advantage of that, but then I have the discipline and the work to when these guys actually start working with me and the intelligence, they start to see that just like in my wrestling career, that there was something special there and that they're willing to invest into the product then.
I loved that you leveraged your
Yeah.
quote unquote celebrity to open those doors and then keep that door open by showing the guys that you're serious and putting in that effort and say, hey, I'm not fucking around here. I want to learn and I'm serious about it. I think that's amazing. That's a great move on your part, leveraging that celebrity that you have.
Could you have gotten a job or worked with these guys or did stuff like did you build any relationships?
I mean, could I work at a bank or something? No. I mean, I'm
Oh,
too old. I'm 40 years old, so it's like, is they're not going to hire me, right? Am I qualified? Yeah, but I'm a school dropout, right? Like I don't have a degree. Like so the idea of like going to work at a bank or something is not a real option. You know what I mean? I mean, and like if prop firms were a thing anymore, I could walk into a prop firm and probably do pretty well. But now it's more like they got all the most of them are fake. Most of them are doing, shady things. And so that avenue no longer exists. So it's like I just trade my own money. And eventually, like I plan to start some type of business around finance, but I'm not quite sure what it will be yet. But I'm going to try my best. And in the off time, I'm a professional coach and I do some training on the side and I teach and I do stuff. And all of it pretty much goes to that mission to where, in 5 to 10 years, I want this to be a real career.
so I got to rewind to something that I heard and we just kind of breezed over somehow. But you're teaching yourself all these things throughout your life. You mentioned coding.
Yeah.
So college dropout, did you teach yourself how to code? And what was that like?
Well, yeah. Essentially, I now I have like the AI, so I can give it bad code and it can fix it. But like essentially, it's like yeah, I taught myself how to do it. I mean, if you want to speak to me about coding, I have no idea how to talk about it because like I'm like an idiot. It's like I put it in because I know what it looks like. I don't know what you fucking call it. You know what I mean? I just like piece it together. It's like oh. I need to look up this stat. I gotta take in this CVS file. I gotta do this. I needed to run these numbers. And then I used to look at old code of stuff that people did and I kind of just literally copied it and see if I could get it to work. And eventually I get it to work. And that's how I taught myself how to do it.
So are your systems like 100% non-discretionary? Are they just fully systematic or what does it really look like when you're trading?
Well, it's different, right? I have like the I guess you could call it an alpha portfolio, right? So that would just be straight options, futures trades, right? And then I have the quant, like a totally systematic quantitative portfolio design. So that switches different types of portfolio based on the economic and trend following system. It creates a rating system and then it'll put assets into certain types of portfolios. And so that's completely automated. Now it's not automated to the point where like it goes into my different accounts and does it for me, but I run it every morning and it tells me what to do and I follow it religiously. So
it spits an output, then you go execute. Yeah.
Yep.
Got it.
I would make it automatic, but I just don't trust the coding skills and stuff that if something like really crazy happened in the market and there was some kind of there was something wrong with the brokers or banks or something, I don't trust it I wouldn't trust my coding skills enough to trust it to like just start throwing out the money.
In a world where all the brokers want to allow you to link everything and anything to them, it's probably not a good idea to do that. I totally
probably not.
Nick, I think we totally breezed over it, but we never actually discussed what it is you trade. Are you an equities trader? Are you a futures trader? Options? What's your bag?
The main markets I trade, I put a highlight of it on my Twitter every day if you want to see it. But the main markets I watch are the stock indices, so ES, NQ, RTY. Then I do the four bond futures, ZT, ZN, ZF, and ZB. And then I trade the SOFR curve and the VIX curve.
Wow.
But my main trades are I bet on SOFR, term structure, things like SOFR versus OIS, so the overnight swap index, or and that's not right. Overnight swaps, yeah, OIS, yeah. So I trade mainly the whites and the reds and SOFRs. The first three or four VIX curves, so the VIX butterflies and VIX spreads, and I trade the stock indices. So those are the main things that I trade.
Okay.
And these are pretty advanced strategies, Sean, to be self-taught. Like, where did you learn these specific strategies?
He said words I don't even understand. That's well done.
Yeah. So really, where did you, I mean, you went deep. And we talk to people on here all the time who are self-taught, right? And they're swing trading equities, stuff like that. You're trading SOFR and volatility curves.
Yeah.
How did you stumble upon that?
The same way. I mean, in order to be successful, you need to have some type of alpha generation, and I just don't think that slinging equities is one of those options. You know what I mean? It's very difficult to beat the stock indices. It's a trend following system. That's what the SPX is. You know, it's very difficult to beat that if you're just going to trade equities. Now, I trade equities. I love trading equities, but then I'm a value investor. You know, I look for value. I put it in my kids' college fund. I do really good with those accounts, but that's a whole different type of investing. That's not trading. And so I think like trading stock indices or just trading individual stocks is so much more difficult to generate higher gains, that it's much better to learn about volatility curves. It's much better to learn a SOFR. It's much better to learn it. And you say, how did I do it? I reached out to professionals. So that's how I did it, right? I was like, "Hey, I want to know how to do this. Explain it to me, please." And that's how I learned. And so, you know, I mean, is it difficult? Yeah, it's difficult, but it's only difficult when you don't understand it. You know what I mean? Like SOFR is not that complicated once you get it, right? The VIX term structure is not that complicated. It's very complicated to say, "Oh, I'm going to trade the July, August, September VIX butterfly against some other butterfly because I think the curve is messed up in the volatility curve." That's a very complicated thing to say. But once you break it down to its little principles, it's not that difficult. So once you understand what you're doing.
You know, Strad said, this goes back to something I say all the time. I'm an options trader, Nick, and I always tell new options traders who are asking me, like, you know, what do I need to know? And I always say, look, options, because they're concerned that options are very complicated. And I say, yes, look, there are lots of people out there who do very complicated option strategies and they do them very well. And it sounds like you are one of those people. But you don't have to do complicated things in options. There are other ways to do options very simply. I like to keep things very simple. I understand what you're doing, Nick, but to explain that to some people, it's very hard, right? It's you're talking about multi-leg strategies. You're watching multiple expirations. You're looking at option skew. Like that can be very intimidating to a lot of people. But it's great that you're doing that, and I'm actually really impressed that was the route you took. That's not the normal route someone new to options trading is gonna go down.
And also, this reminds me of Jason a little bit, Sean, in the way that you just reached out to all these people that you thought maybe could help you and just said, "Forget it. Like, why not?" What was that process like for you? Were you like nervous or intimidated? Were you like, "No, fuck it. Like, I'm gonna send
I'm a very introverted person, so it's very difficult to me. You notice, like any interview you'll see, I have black on because I sweated my ass off because I'm not used to talking to people
the same
like
way,
this.
brother. Don't worry.
like I'm a very introverted person, so I type it all out, and then like my hands are shaking, and then I just send it off. You know what I mean? Like thank God for the internet because I don't have to make a first impression. You know, I a joke my wife and I have, and she's the opposite of me. She's very social. You put her anywhere, she can talk to anybody about nothing. I don't know how they do it. You know what I mean? I don't know how my wife can have a conversation with someone for 2 hours. They could talk about absolutely nothing, and that person will leave thinking she is the smartest, most intelligent person in the world. You know what I mean? I don't have that skill, right? I can do quantitative finance, but I have never been able to talk to someone about the weather. Never. I can if you talk to me in a grocery line, I freeze up, right? I am a very introverted person. I don't know. I don't have those skills. It's just at some point in my life I decided, hey, like that's just who you are. And so when I reach out to people, I'm just very honest. I say, hey, I don't know what I'm doing. I have no idea what I'm doing, but I would like to. And I promise you that if you help me, I'm willing to trade anything. And I promise if you help me, I will show you that like I'm worth the investment. And then I try to prove that I am.
And I'll bet they respect the hell out of you for approaching it with that kind of authenticity and being so genuine. And you probably get more responses than somebody touting some sort of resume from Brown, because if you're a hedge fund manager, that's what arrives into your inbox, 10 times every morning.
Yeah. I mean, I've never had anyone deny me help. Never. Everyone has always been willing to help me, and I've offered money, I've offered services, I've offered anything, and all of them have done it for free, and it's been just a wonderful experience. And some of these people are now my lifelong friends. So
I had a similar experience where I was shit scared and I was transitioning careers and I didn't know what to do. I just threw myself out there and asked for help. And people like Brian Shannon or JC were like, yeah, we'll mentor you, kid. You know nothing, but we'll help you. And then the rest was history. But if I never just had that one like nerve-wracking, anxiety-stricken moment where I was like, please help me, and just put it all out there in the most authentic way, who knows what would have happened. So
I'll give you an example. I read a blog post, and it was talking about how to use the SOFR curve to bet on a synthetic steepener with options. So you're talking about mid curve SOFR options. And so I sent this message to this guy, and I was like, hey, I understand this trade, but the symbols he was using, I have no idea what he's actually betting on. And so I said, I'm going to sound like a complete idiot here, but I have no idea what contracts this guy's betting on, what options he's betting on. And so I send the guy off, and he's like, oh, these are just Bloomberg codes. That's why you don't know them. Bloomberg has weird codes.
Yeah.
So that he tells me what they are, and then, oh, now I get it, right? So if you're willing to just be an idiot for 5 seconds, it's usually not that big of a deal. You know what I mean? And people, I've never had someone look down on me when I ask a genuine question. You know what I mean? Like, hey, I could just lie about it and act like I know it. But then a month from now, when we are talking about it and I don't understand it, they're going to get frustrated. So I've always been very upfront. I always try my best to research everything as much as possible before I come with the questions. But if I have a question, or if I need to figure out something, I have no problem lowering myself to making myself look dumb. So I'm not dumb.
I think this is interesting from like a general personality standpoint, where you're willing to ask and put yourself out there, but at the same time, like that requires a certain style or amount of confidence. Do you think that achieving so many things in other disciplines as a fighter and other areas of life maybe helped you, or were you always that way, where you were just not afraid?
No. I wasn't. I was when I first became a fighter and I got a little bit of fame, I was terrible. I was terrible in front of the camera. I was terrible when they interviewed me. I was a nervous wreck. Because I came from such a bad background. Like, it's like, I don't want a camera in my face. I was an insecure person. It's like, yeah, I'm a great fighter, but I always carried around this like poor kind of mentality, like, oh, my stepfather beat me, or oh, I've always had no money. I've been broke. I always had bad clothes, bad shoes. Like, I never was taken care of. So it's like I had to really try extremely hard to shed that mentality. And it still hangs, it's right behind me all the time. It's just I've decided to not listen to it. I've decided to conquer it. And so when I feel like that, I just have to get past it. And throughout the years, I've been able to just push it to the side. But it's always a difficult. It's not something that's easy for me. It's stressful, and it wigs me out a lot. But I just do it anyways.
So they gave you a lot of experience as a fighter. One of them was just shoving a camera in your face. I'll bet your last interview was a lot better than your first.
Yeah.
Nick, you sound like maybe you've had some successful experience with therapy. Have you gone through therapy to work through some of this stuff?
Not anything successful. No, like I was like mandated to see some counselors eventually when I got to move to my father and stuff like that. I never really found too much relief in that.
Hmm.
I just taught myself, right? I dealt with myself, and there was a certain point in my life where I was really on the edge. You know what I mean? When I was in college and I dropped out of college and I didn't know what I was going to do and I threw away my wrestling career and I threw it all. There are many points in my life where I thought it would be better to just end it, to just be done with it. But I just decided in that moment, like, like not to be graphic, but like I could blow my brains out right now, or I could just live a life like I don't care if it fails, right? Because it's like, well, how could you fail more than that? You can't, right? So I just sort of switched that mentality of instead of being depressed, instead of not understanding why we're so frustrated or we're not successful, to just try your hardest. And what's the worst thing that can happen? It can't get worse than blowing your brains out. So it's like, well, fuck it. Let's just keep going forward.
Well, Nick, in a lot of ways, you've already answered this question, but I'm curious. I know you get people approaching you not only asking about trading, but they also ask you about fighting.
Yep.
And you probably get people who are very new to the business, to either business, asking you advice, like, how do I get started? I imagine the advice you give to someone who wants to get into MMA is not that different than the same advice you would give to somebody who wants to get into trading. Am I wrong, or am I close to
No,
something?
it's the same idea, and it's like I just reverse the roles, right? I just try to think about how I approach people and what I want from them, right? So when I reach out to someone big, like what am I trying to get and what am I offering to them, right? So when a new person comes to me, right? Like I sort of just give them, let's use fighting because that's easier. If someone wants to be trained by me, right? I'm a hard master, let's say. Like I'm very hard to deal with. Like I say, this is what I want. I want you to wake up at this time. I want to see you at the gym at this time. I want you to do this. I want you to train this. I want you to watch this tape. And I give them a list of things to do. And then they can choose to do them or not. Right. And if they do them, then I invest my time in them. So, or if they don't, then I know they're not cut out for this. So the worst thing you can do as a proper mentor is to sell someone like a fake bill of goods, right? Like that anybody can do this, right? You can't be a fighter if you're not athletic. If you have a weak chin, you can't be a fighter. You'll get knocked out. If you're not tough, you can't be a fighter. If you're not strong, can't be a fighter, right? If you don't have discipline, can't be a fighter. If you can't watch your weight, can't be a fighter. So I sort of give them these requirements, and then if they succeed them, I go all in on them. And if they can't get through that initial test, then I don't. And that's how I expect people to treat me. And that's why when I reach out to someone and I offer them, I say, hey, I will do anything for your help. I don't mean I'll be nice to you. I mean anything. Anything that doesn't land me in jail, and probably a few things that would, I will do if you help me. So that's that's what I expect from other people as well.
So when you deliver that mentor advice, hey, do all these things, right? How many people, like how many out of 10 come back to you and they actually do those basic things that you're asking for? And how many just don't even get that high level stuff done? One, right? Yeah.
1 out of 10.
Which is why when it comes to being a trader and investor, a lot of people think this is so hard. A lot of it is just like anything else in life. It's hard work, and 90% of others are not going to do it, are not willing to do it. And that's a differentiator right there that you can start on. I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Nick, we promised we wouldn't keep you for more than an hour, and I think we've exceeded that by now.
Okay.
Listen, this was awesome. I'm so glad to get to know you, and I didn't know that you lived just north of Miami. Eventually, me and Straza and some guys from our team, we're all going to be in Miami together at some point doing something. And when that happens, I would love it if we can hang out with you. That would be so cool.
I would love it. Hit me up. We'll for sure go out.
That would be so cool. So cool. All right, Nick, former UFC fighter, now trader who's crushing it with the VIX and the SOFR and the yield curves and all the crazy shit that half of it I don't even understand, but that is awesome. thanks for being here, man. Thanks for being off the charts, and we appreciate you.
Well, thank you guys. I appreciate the opportunity, and it was awesome to talk to you. Talk to you later.
So wow, that was great, Straza.
That was incredible. Something different for us, but also a lot of the same. Like a lot of the lessons and themes that are going to stand out when you listen to that, I think were echoed by others that we talked to.
Yeah. I just can't wrap my head around a guy, any guy, who can stand in a cage and just take a beating like UFC fighters do on a fight to fight basis. Like I just can't. It was interesting to hear him talk about how it doesn't even hurt when you're in it. And I guess I believe that to a point, because your adrenaline's going, like you're just trying to survive. The last thing you're worried about is pain. But man, the days and weeks following those fights have to be brutal.
You know, a lot of things. Here's one thing I learned about Nik from that hour. He's a freak. He's highly intelligent, highly motivated, right? Type A to the core. And if he puts his mind to something, he's going to get it. You don't want to be in the ring with a guy like this. Also, he hit like a fuck it face that he alluded to during the podcast. When I asked him, like, how did you just reach out to this guy? He got to a point in his life where he had nothing to lose. You don't fuck with somebody who has nothing to lose, right? Because they're going in one of two directions. That's like we talk about an inflection point in a trend.
Yeah.
You're breaking out or you're breaking down when you get to fuck it mode. And he got into fuck it mode, and he did all the right things to rip him out of that place and into a far better place. And I think what stands out most to me about that conversation is work ethic. Kept saying hyper focused. If he put his mind to something, it was likely that he was going to do it. And I think he learned that about himself and learned how to harness that power for good.
No, that's so important when you're talking about the fuck it mode. I like that phrase. But a lot of that can go two ways. And sometimes when people are in fuck it mode, they have all the best intentions, but they're so like over the top about, swimming against the current or whatever, and they just tire themselves out and it just blows up in their face. But you're right. He made so many great decisions, reaching out to people, overcoming his fear. He talked about it. He was so afraid. He was nervous. He was sweating, trying to reach out to people that he was intimidated by, which to hear about him being intimidated by anybody sounds crazy, right? Because he could beat the shit out of anybody he comes across on the street. But yet he too, just like everyone else, is intimidated by people who have what he doesn't have. That's humbling and inspiring, man.
And imagine learning public speaking skills. Most of us get that in high school or college, doing class projects and having to present in front of the class or whatever it might be. He would just get a microphone shoved in his face after a UFC fight. Can you imagine that? Like, that's how he cut his teeth in media. Now he comes on here, he's fine. It was great. With a camera in front of his face. He's got one mounted right on his PC in front of him.
That reminds me, Straza, when we were in Bangkok, you missed out. The rest of us went to a Muay Thai fight.
Yes.
A number of fights at a event. And one of the strangest things that blew my mind was literally the two fighters that were in the ring. As soon as they were done, they would walk off the ring about 100 yards over to this other area where they had to shake hands and take pictures with anyone who wanted to come up and talk and do that. And I was just like, this seems like the worst time. These guys just got their asses beat and now they have to pose for photos. Like, do that before, but not after. It's hard.
These are the extracurriculars, that you don't think of. You think somebody, he's a UFC fighter. That's great. You don't think of the public speaking aspect of being a UFC fighter, right? And how that might have helped you. So I think we dove into a couple different, interesting themes with Nik, and he's still writing, his journey. Like, he's on his way, but I can't wait to talk to him again in 5 years and see where he is then, because
yeah, I know it comes off as like we're just being nice at the end when I said that I want to hang out with Miami, but I definitely want to hang out with him when we go to Miami. Seriously.
3 more. I'll bet I get to hang out with him before you.
I'll be jealous if you do. I might just book a last minute flight and come down anyway.
No, I enjoyed that conversation honestly as much as any. I think this is going to be a great pod. So
yeah.